I did read them, and I laughed, and I just want to say, first of all, I'm appreciative of your passion and the process and your ideas and the spirit of collaboration.
Something was already cracking before the cameras even rolled, and now, thanks to a resurfaced voice memo, people are whispering that what sounded like polite collaboration may have actually been the opening move in a quiet, behind-the-scenes tug-of-war over who really had control of the story. And once you hear the tone, the pauses, the careful wording, it stops sounding friendly and starts sounding strategic. Because here's what makes this leak so explosive. It doesn't contain yelling, threats, or dramatic confrontations. It's calm, measured, thoughtful. And that's exactly why listeners are reading between every single line. The memo comes from Justin, sent after receiving script ideas, and right away the energy feels like someone trying to encourage while also gently holding the line. And in Hollywood, that balancing act can mean everything. At first, the words feel warm, supportive, almost disarming. But in creative power struggles, praise can sometimes be a soft landing for resistance. And the internet has latched onto one particular moment as the beginning of what they believe was a subtle but meaningful boundary being drawn. On the surface, that sounds lovely. Who wouldn't want to hear their passion appreciated? But in the world of film rewrites, I appreciate your passion can sometimes translate to I'm not committing to these changes. It's encouragement without endorsement, validation without surrender. And that distinction is exactly where speculation is growing. Because immediately after that praise, the memo shifts from appreciation to direction. Not rejection, not dismissal, but something in between. A kind of creative diplomacy. And that's where people say the real tension starts to peek through. A combination, not a replacement. Not yes, let's use your version. A blend.
I think that it's really good. I laughed. My gut tells me it's going to be a combination of this, and we're going to find it and what was there. I want to be mindful to not add too much in terms of page count because we're already
emerging. A collaborative middle ground. And that word choice, combination, is now being treated like the first clue that he wasn't ready to hand over the creative steering wheel, even if he was trying to keep the mood positive. Hollywood history is full of stories where actors contribute to scripts, directors reshape scenes, and writers protect structure. It's normal. But what makes this moment feel different to observers is the timing. This is happening before filming, before rehearsals, before momentum locks in. That's when creative territory is most sensitive. That's when ownership lines quietly get drawn. And then comes another moment that sounds practical on the surface, but to gossip watchers feels like another gentle brake being applied. Now that sounds like logistics. Page count, scene length, pacing, completely reasonable production concerns. But layered onto the earlier combination comment, some listeners hear something else. A director protecting structure, subtly signaling that expansion has limits. In other words, collaboration is welcome, but control still sits somewhere specific. And this is where the tone of the leak becomes fascinating. There's no conflict in the audio itself, no raised voices, no shutdown, just careful wording, encouragement mixed with boundaries, enthusiasm mixed with restraint. And in Hollywood, that mix can be the prelude to bigger disagreements later, especially when creative visions aren't perfectly aligned. Because right after this memo, the conversation apparently continues in messages that shift from creative notes to something more emotional, more personal, and, depending on interpretation, possibly more political.
As for Taylor and Ryan and Sean Levy, for that matter, I'm the luckiest mother effer on the planet to have them as my dance mom, stage level moms. They are embarrassingly effusive.
This is where support systems enter the picture, not quietly, but by name. That line has become one of the most replayed parts of the entire transcript. Because now the conversation isn't just between two collaborators. It suddenly widens. It introduces creative confidants, industry heavyweights, trusted voices. And while there's nothing wrong with having supportive friends, gossip circles are debating whether this moment subtly shifted the psychological balance. Not a threat, not an ultimatum, but a reminder of backing, of alliances, of influence. In creative negotiations, knowing someone has powerful advocates in their corner can change how conversations feel, even if nothing is explicitly said. And then comes the line that sent the internet into full dramatic interpretation mode, a metaphor. a reference, a playful image that some people hear as empowerment and others hear as a warning wrapped in fantasy. Dragons. That's the word that changed the temperature. Because dragons protect, but they also burn. They defend, but they also dominate. And while the comment may have been playful, metaphorical, or symbolic of loyalty and strength, the timing, right after a creative boundary was gently drawn in the memo, has led some to interpret it as foreshadowing a power dynamic that would later become more visible. Again, none of this is a fight on tape. No explosive argument, just tone, phrasing, sequence. And sometimes in Hollywood stories, that's where the real drama lives, not in what's shouted, but in what's carefully said. By the end of this exchange, what listeners are left with is a fascinating contrast. On one side, a director sounding collaborative but protective of structure. On the other, an actor expressing passion, vision, and strong creative backing. Both enthusiastic, both invested, but possibly standing at slightly different angles when it came to who would ultimately shape the story. And if this memo really was the beginning, then what followed may not have been a sudden fallout at all, but a slow build from polite resistance.
If you ever get around to watching Game of Thrones, you'll appreciate that Khaleesi, who, spoiler alert, kind of was a villain in the movie. Turns out, kind of. Like her, I happen to have a few dragons, for better or worse, but usually for better.
To firm conviction, to creative lines that became harder and harder to blur. Because here's what makes this whole situation feel less like a sudden explosion and more like a slow burn collision that was quietly set in motion long before anyone realized there was friction at all. The tone in that memo doesn't sound like a fight, but it does sound like two creative forces, moving toward the same goal from very different directions, each convinced they understand the story's heartbeat, each believing they're protecting the soul of the project, and each expressing that belief in ways that are calm on the surface but loaded underneath. By the time that combination comment lands, followed by the note about page count, the message is subtle but clear to people dissecting every word now. Collaboration, yes, but within limits. Enthusiasm, yes, but with structure. Appreciation, yes, but not full creative surrender. And in filmmaking, that's the exact pressure point where power dynamics start forming quietly, long before headlines ever appear. Because think about it, when someone pours energy into rewriting or reshaping material, it usually comes from passion and belief. But when another person is responsible for holding the whole film together, they're thinking about pacing, runtime, narrative balance, tone continuity, and the invisible architecture of storytelling that viewers never see but always feel. So when Justin says he wants to be mindful about adding more pages, it might sound small, but in creative language that can mean we have to protect the structure from expanding beyond its emotional shape. And that's where observers say the emotional temperature starts to shift, not in the audio itself, but in the interpretation of how that feedback might have been received. Because when someone hears their ideas met with caution instead of full embrace, it can feel like resistance, even if the intent is logistical. And when you add creative pride, artistic ownership, and personal investment into that mix, even gentle pushback can sting. Then comes the widening of the circle, the moment where support isn't just internal confidence, but external validation from respected peers. When those names enter the conversation, the dynamic stops feeling like a simple two-person collaboration and starts feeling like a creative ecosystem with invisible weight behind it. Not a threat, not a confrontation, just presence. And presence in Hollywood can speak volumes without anyone ever raising their voice. From there, the dragon's metaphor lingers in the air like symbolic smoke. Some listeners hear empowerment, a playful nod to strength and loyalty. Others hear a coded message about having powerful allies and protective forces. The beauty of metaphor is that it allows interpretation, and right now, interpretation is exactly what's fueling the gossip wildfire. Because when that line is placed next to earlier moments of gentle resistance, the contrast becomes irresistible to analyze. And suddenly, the voice memo stops sounding like a simple thank you message and starts sounding like the first chapter of a story about creative territory, emotional investment, and the delicate dance of collaboration between two strong creative personalities. Not enemies, not adversaries, but possibly not fully aligned on where the final shape of the story should land. What makes this so compelling is that both sides, in this snapshot, sound sincere. Justin sounds genuinely appreciative and excited, but also responsible for keeping the film grounded in its original design. Blake sounds deeply invested, creatively energized, and backed by trusted voices who believe in her instincts. No villain, no hero. Just two people who care, maybe equally, maybe differently, about what the story becomes. And that's the kind of situation that doesn't explode overnight. It simmers. It builds in quiet meetings, in rewrites, in rehearsals, in tone discussions, in pacing debates. It grows in the spaces between approval and hesitation, between encouragement and boundaries. By the time public tension ever shows, the roots often stretch back to moments like this, moments that seemed harmless at the time, but in hindsight feel like early tremors. Because collaboration in film is like shared authorship of emotion. Every scene carries someone's fingerprints. Every line reflects someone's instinct. When those instincts don't perfectly overlap, the negotiation becomes part of the process. Sometimes that negotiation strengthens the work. Sometimes it leaves invisible bruises that surface later. The leaked memo doesn't show a collapse. It shows a beginning of tone setting, of creative roles subtly being defined, of structure meeting passion, of vision meeting responsibility. And in the world of gossip and speculation, that's more than enough to spark a narrative that something deeper was already unfolding. What makes it unforgettable is how ordinary it sounds, just professionals talking through ideas. But inside that normalcy, people now hear layers: diplomacy, restraint, pride, alliance, metaphor. And when those layers are stacked together, the story transforms from a simple voice note into what many believe was the moment the creative balance quietly tipped. Because sometimes the loudest conflicts start in the softest voices. And whether this memo was simply two artists navigating collaboration, or the first sign of a deeper divide over who shaped the story's final form, one thing is certain: once audio like this enters the public space, every syllable becomes evidence, every pause becomes meaning, and every metaphor becomes prophecy. That's why this leak feels less like gossip and more like a missing puzzle piece people didn't know they were looking for.